I wanna go to college, expand my knowledge, and get a bachelor's degree. I wanna be successful, less stressful. Education is the key.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm so thrilled to welcome you to the Alumni Mixer for Access Week. This is our 8th annual Access Week at Rutgers, New Brunswick, and one of our goals with Access Week is to stop and take a moment and reflect and pause and think critically about where we are as a university in terms of our ability to welcome first generation, low income student and also students of color. And so one of the things that I noticed even when I was interviewing for this position at Rutgers was the number of alumni who continue to be in
Wow.
Okay.
All right, everyone. So that was something. All right, let's see here where we are. Share screen. Okay. So again, one of the things that I noticed and that I appreciated when I was interviewing here at Rutgers was the commitment that alumni had to this institution. We have dedicated staff from the division who are alumni of this institution. And so one of the things that we always want to do within Access Week is to make sure that we hold a space for our alumni. And so I do wish that we operated and lived within a society where people would not take the opportunity to use an event such as this to use racist language, but unfortunately that is where we are right now at this moment. It's not a new moment, and I'm sure for those of you who have been alumni of this institution, you may yourselves have experienced something like that while you were students here. But as alumni of Rutgers, as people who have been historically underrepresented at institutions like Rutgers, and quite frankly, as people who face marginalization on a daily basis just within US society, we know that things like that upset us, but we don't let it stop us. We keep moving forward, especially in our pursuit of educational excellence and in our pursuit of community. One of the things that I was listening to, or I had the opportunity to hear Melissa Harris Perry speak recently, and one of the things that she said was that one of the reasons why she stays hopeful is because she thinks about what our ancestors, particularly those who identify as African American, one of the first things they did after the period of enslavement ended was seek out their family, seek out education, and figure out how to engage politically. And so in the same way that they pressed on in community, we're going to do that as well. And so just a few housekeeping things. We are recording the session. And so we wanted to let you know that by being in this space, you have consented to being recorded. We also just wanted to let you know that if you have an issue with that, you are able to chat me in particular and let us know if that prevents you from participating in this event. And so with that said, we are going to go ahead and start our panel. We have our moderators for the Alumni Mixer. Again, one of the great things about our community here is Rutgers is the number of alumni who work in staff positions. And so we have Ms. Jakasia Wiley, who's the director of UpwardBound and pre-college initiatives. She's also a Rutgers alum in 10 and 11, as well as Ms. Tiandra Jones, the director of student support services, who's a Rutgers alum from the years 2011 and 12. And so a few things about logistics for tonight. There will be a question and answer portion, but until that moment, attendees are muted. We will ask you to use the raise hand button, which you can find on the reaction menu at the bottom right during this question and answer portion. And we will also allow you to unmute yourself. And so our featured speaker for this evening is Kevin Powell. Kevin is one of the most celebrated political, cultural, literary, and hip hop voices in America today. The Jersey City product of a single mother, absent father, horrific poverty and violence, he was able to study at Rutgers University in his home state of New Jersey due to the Educational Opportunity Fund, a program created during the Civil Rights Movement to benefit poor youth. Says Kevin, just be able to get to college, to be exposed to a new world, a new way, changed my life forever, and I am forever grateful for the chance. Kevin is a poet, journalist, civil and human rights activist, and the author of 14 books, including his newest title, When We Free the World, a collection of essays plus one poem about the present and future of America. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, ESPN, CNN, NPR, HuffPost, and many other publications through the years. Kevin's 15th book will be a biography of Tupac Shakur, the global pop culture and hip hop icon. And Kevin, with that, we'll go ahead and let you take it away.
Greetings, everyone. I want to thank God first and foremost for this opportunity. I'm a Christian, but if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you're some other faith, even if you're agnostic or atheistic, you have that right. And I just hope that we can agree that we're all human beings, part of the human family. Let me just say this right out the gate. I'm not tripping about what we just saw. Sadly, I've witnessed this my entire adult life, starting at Rutgers, starting as a young student leader. And it is what it is. And we're going to get through this because it's important that we have these kind of conversations. I want to thank you, Dr. Wooten, Len Flannery, Jakasha Wally, Tiandra Jones, Dr. Branch, the Rutgers Division of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, everybody that's on this Zoom. I want to definitely shout out Dr. McGinty and Dr. Howard as well. And Rutgers, my school, my alma mater. I'm in New York City. I've been here for a long time, but my heart is in New Jersey. That's where I was born and raised, as was said. I even just ordered a couple of Rutgers hoodies the other day because I was like, I need some more Rutgers gear, you know what I'm saying? But, here we are. And I want to talk about a few things because we're talking about unlocking pathways to success. And in an ideal world, in an ideal situation, people will just be able to do their work, just be able to go to college, get an education, and be at peace. But unfortunately, in the world that we live in, including our country, not just our country, but this whole world, we have to still deal with racism. Next month is Women's History Month. We still have to deal with sexism. We still have to deal with homophobia and transphobia and ageism and ableism and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-immigrant sentiments, all kinds of hatred. But I have hope. I have hope because that's who I am. That's what I've been doing for the past 30 plus years since I was a student at Rutgers University. And I know that there are good people out there in spite of the hatred and ignorance that we see sadly on a daily basis because of who people are, no matter who they are. We got to be honest about the times that we live in. Black History Month exists and was created by Carter G. Woodson, as we should know, a great scholar, a doctor, like Dr. Wooten is a doctor, a scholar, a great scholar herself. In 1926, it was Negro History Week. Why was Black History Month created as Negro History Week back in 1926? Because if we're going to tell the story of America, it should be inclusive of all people, no matter who they are, no matter what their identities. And his point was that it's a shame that so much is left out of America about the contributions of Black people, of African Americans, to this society. And so that's why it was created. And by 1976, it became Black History Month. And this is thanks to the Civil Rights Movement of the 50s and 60s. We know, as I just said, next month is Women's History Month. The same thing is. I mean, I grew up an A student in Jersey City, K through 12. Just like I barely learned anything about Black history, I learned nothing about the contributions of women and girls to our society. And I'm talking about across the board, math, science, all of it, which is why if y'all follow me on Instagram, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn, you'll see me posting this month, every single day, Black History Month facts. What I'll be doing next month, Women History Month facts, because I think it's important for us to use the tools that we have to educate people, because part of the reason why we see all this ignorance and people using this ignorant energy to say ignorant stuff, to do ignorant stuff, is because of a gross miseducation. Honestly, that's what it is, a gross miseducation about who they are and about who other people are. I want to encourage you all to please, 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 since we're talking about pathways to success and some ways we can be successful, watch a movie that's on HBO Max called Judas and the Black Messiah. Judas and the Black Messiah. Zinzi Kugler and Ryan Coogler, husband and wife team, produced it along with some other folks. We know Ryan Coogler directed Black Panther, $1 billion movie for Marvel. It's an important film because it's also about the history that's often left out. And I want to get to this topic of unlocking pathways to success. And I want to hear your voices. And I'm glad to be here with folks who also love Rutgers the way I do, in spite of any challenges that we may have had. It's okay. But, you know, if you really love your country, as James Baldwin said famously, please read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, one of his many books. If you really love, you know, your country, then you reserve the right to criticize it to make it better. I would not be who I am. There'd be no 14 books. There'd be no business that I've had for myself for the past 24 years. There'd be no visits to all 50 states in this country, 5 of the 7 continents on the planet, if it wasn't for my time at Rutgers University. It was at Rutgers in New Brunswick, Rutgers College, when there were still colleges there, like Rutgers College, where I first became a student leader. I began to realize for the first time in my life that my voice mattered. And it was also the first time that I took seriously being a writer, something I knew I wanted to do since I was a child. Because my mother, as I was growing up in Jersey City, took me to the library from the time I was 8 years old. So I fell in love with books very early, but I didn't know, again, back to the education that I had, that a Maya Angelou, a Nikki Giovanni, a Sonia Sanchez, a Papa Neruda, a Langston Hughes, I didn't know those folks existed. So I did not know that I could actually be a writer until I got to Rutgers University. What did Rutgers do for me? It taught me about people like Paul Robeson. I kept hearing that name, Paul Robeson, everywhere I went on the college campus. And I realized he was from New Jersey, just like I was. And he had gone to Rutgers over 100 years ago. And he had been an incredible student where he, as one of the only Black students on the campus in the 19 teens, actually graduated as a valedictorian. And he got letters in several sports. So he was also a great athlete and a scholar. And I knew that he would go on to be able to be a classically trained actor, and he got a law degree. He's a member of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. I mean, just an incredible human being. And so he gave me a pathway to success. And what does that mean? He, Paul Robeson, and people like him that I began to learn about as I was at Rutgers University, working at the Alexander Library on College Avenue, you know, reading books every chance I got when I wasn't shelving books, is that we have to, as younger people and older people, if we're serious about being successful, we got to read, we got to study, we got to travel, we got to read, we got to study, we got to travel. Hashtag read, study, travel. We got to have a foundation that understands that education is a part of our lives for the rest of our lives. It doesn't stop with your time at Rutgers. It doesn't stop with a job, a good job and a salary and benefits, pension plan, any of that stuff. You know, part of the reason why I'm looking at the N word right now in the chat room is because a lot of people are not properly educated. It is a reality, you know, and I'm not even offended by it at this point because I know that people have been so miseducated about people in our country that it becomes very easy to other people. And so part of the unlocking pathways to success to me is to understand who you are. Know your history. I don't care if you're Jewish, if you're Italian, if you're Puerto Rican, Dominican, Mexican, African-American, West Indian, no matter what your background is, Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, Native American, indigenous people, no matter who you are, you have a responsibility as part of your education to be proud of who you are, know who you are, and not use who you are to diss or hurt other people. When I think about my education as someone who came out of Rutgers University, the thing that I'm most proud of, and I want to shout out Dr. Cheryl Wall, who died a year ago, you know, the love that I got from people like her who taught me my own history that I didn't know. It just been a class called Harlem Renaissance that she taught for years there. And so pathways to success for me is that we gotta take education seriously and know that part of our responsibility is not just to go get a job, have a career, but we also have a responsibility to be educators ourselves for the rest of our lives, for the rest of our lives, for the rest of our lives. Bring it back to Judas and the Black Messiah. People were shocked to find out that Fred Hampton, the main figure in that film, that story, was only 21 years old when he died, when he was killed, when he was assassinated, when he was slain. But he was a voracious reader. He read nonstop. He could quote all kinds of stuff. If any of you've seen the film, he said he doesn't write his speeches down. He speaks from his heart. He speaks from what he has learned. And so I can't not separate success from education. I was raised by a single mother, single Black mother who had an 8th grade education. She migrated from the South, from South Carolina up to New Jersey, the Jersey City where I was born and raised. And my mother, from the time I was 3 or 4 years old, in spite of only having a formal education of the 8th grade, said to me, "You're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college." Because my mother understood even then that the pathway to success was to get a quality education. And it was after I got to Rutgers as a product of the Educational Opportunity Fund, EOF, that I to have a chance to be a first generation college student. And so I also learned when I was at Rutgers University, in the spirit of Black History Month, I need to practice what Harriet Tubman practiced, which is it can't just be about you. You have to go back and help other people to be empowered as well, because that is really what education and success means. Yeah, you're good, but what about other folks? What about other folks? Which is why it's important the work that the folks on this thread are doing. And then, when we talk about students specifically, and I'm not sure how many students are out there, how many are alumni, but I'm just going to say this. We got to practice excellence. We got to be about excellence. We have to be about excellence. No matter what you want to do. I don't care if you want to be a doctor, an accountant, a writer like me, a journalist like me, but it has to be a bar of excellence. We've seen where mediocrity and just being average has gotten us over the last few years in our country. We've seen what it's been like for people who are not qualified to be in certain positions, to be in positions of leadership, and what has happened to our society. This ain't about Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. I'm talking about what kind of human being do we want to be as we talk about unlocking pathways to success? That's what I'm talking about, and if you really take seriously your own life and you take seriously your education for the rest of your life, including while you're at Rutgers University, then you have a responsibility to be excellent and not do things to just get by, not just make up stuff, not just wing stuff, not just freelance stuff, but to actually take seriously, what we're doing. And I think that, I have internal faith in young people and students on college campuses like Rutgers all the time, because I know that when we look at anything that has happened in our world and in our country from generation to generation, era to era, oftentimes it's been young people at the forefront of it. But we need to be excellent, like Fred Hampton was excellent. We need to be excellent the way a young Bell Hooks was excellent, a young Gloria Steinem was excellent. We need to be excellent at everything that we do. And this is critical, because we're not just going to these college campuses for ourselves. What I realized when I was at Rutgers, I'm going to school for myself, for my mother, for my grandmother, grandfather, everyone who came before me who never had an opportunity. When I write my books, 14 books, I'm realizing I'm not just writing these books for myself. I'm writing these books for everyone who's never had a voice, who doesn't think they have a voice. That's how serious this is for me. And so students, I'm asking you, in fact, I'm begging you, especially when you see all this madness happening around us, be excellent. And, use an affirmation that I encourage young people to use all around the world. I am a genius. We are geniuses. We are geniuses. We are geniuses. We are geniuses. Not in an arrogant way, but understanding that, as Mr. Rogers said, one of my heroes, you're special. Every single one of you is special. And then, to the alum, I'll say this, please continue or even do more to support students at Rutgers University. That is critical. There has to be a connection. I've done a lot of residencies at colleges, universities around the country. I won't say the name of any of them, but there was one in particular where I saw such a huge disconnect between the students and the alum. The only time the alum came back was for like homecoming, for football, for the homecoming football game. That was it. That's not acceptable. As I've said to the folks here, including Ms. Wiley, Ms. Flannery, when we had a call a couple of weeks ago, I pride myself on being accessible to folks at Rutgers University. I pride myself on that. People know they can reach out to me anytime if anything is needed that can support Rutgers University, especially support students at Rutgers University. We need that. Students, back to you all, but you all have to ask for support. You also have to develop a relationship with the alumni. Reach out to them. How can I get in touch with you? Can I just talk to you every now and then? Because you can't travel either group, students and alumni, as if we're in some sort of bubble, isolated from each other. That does not lead to success, in my humble opinion. And, I'm going to close it here because I really want to hear you all's voices, and I prefer for this to be interactive the rest of the way. But what is success? I'm going to end it with this. Yep, again, I'm proud of what my resume CV says, but my success means nothing, quote unquote, if I'm not empowering other people to be successful, to be leaders as well. It's really that simple for me. What is a leader? A leader is someone who changes the direction of the conversation, comes up with a new vocabulary. A leader is someone who builds an organization, institution, business, etc., that supports people being empowered and successful, like the institutions, the organizations that put together this program. What is a leader? Leaders create other leaders. It ain't about you, it's about us. It's about us, it's about us. Leaders understand that they got to have something I call a leadership toolbox. You know, when I got to Rutgers University, I'm going to keep it real with y'all. I'm keeping it in 1,000 with y'all. I was socially awkward. I was very shy. I was a mama's boy. I was always up under my mother. You couldn't even imagine, I couldn't even imagine being a public speaker. I couldn't even imagine that my voice even mattered. It was at Rutgers that I learned how to speak in public. I wrote for the school newspapers. I learned how to write, how to edit, how to lay out publications. I learned how to run meetings. I learned how to do security for meetings. I learned how to do proposals for organizations. I learned how to start organizations. I learned how to do conferences, events, all the things that I've used in my life ever since started at Rutgers University, because I took the accumulation of those skill sets very, very seriously. That's what I'm asking you all to do. And you don't just keep it to yourself, you don't hoard it, but you share those skill sets, you share that knowledge with other people. That's success. And then I'm going to say it again. We gotta practice love. Love. You know, I'm not tripping about all the stuff that's happening. Like I said, I've been woke, as we say, since Rutgers. You can imagine the things that I've experienced. But I know that love is the answer, no matter what. And I know that when people have hate in their hearts, when there's ignorance and fear of difference, fear of change, fear of moving forward, people do very ugly and toxic things like Zoom bomb peaceful gatherings like this. That's what they do, because they're operating off of hate and fear and ignorance, you know? But I'm not gonna, I decided years ago, y'all, I'm not going to be, if we're talking about being a leader or being successful, I'm not going to be what other people have been to me. I'm not doing that. It's love for me. I'm going to challenge. Trust me, I speak out against all forms of oppression always. I don't care what it is, not just racism, everything. I take very seriously being an ally to people who are even different than I am. Very serious about that. But I just want us to think about it. You know, this is the work that we have to do, because it's not just about getting a college education and getting a job and a career, but we're also asking you all there, students and alumni, let's work in partnership, because we're going to have to work together to turn all this around. This is a deep, deep period we are in American history, you know, and that's what we got to do. That's what we got to do. So I want to say I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I'm ready to deal with questions, answers, you know, whatever y'all want to talk about, as long as it's not hate and ignorance and fear. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Kevin. Talk about inspiring. I swear, inspired people inspire others. And in your words, you were so encouraging to us. You mentioned a few things. If you don't mind, just a little bit before we definitely open up for Q&A, I wanted to ask a question, and Tiandra wants to ask you a question also.
Yes,
you mentioned your leadership toolbox, and something that we tell our students is always about connections. You know, your network is your net worth. And you did mention about being more involved. Could you share some of your strategies? You mentioned that you were shy, you were a little awkward growing your first.
Yeah.
So could you share some strategies for some students who may still have that phase, especially in this virtual world?
That's a great question. I was terrified of speaking. I didn't think that my voice mattered, but it was when I started getting involved in student organizations at Rutgers, you know, and people would ask, you know, to the credit of some of the older students, you know, what do you think? You know, what are your thoughts about stuff? And I was 18 years old, 19 years old. That transformed me, that empowered me, you know, and I had mentors, you know, a woman named Lisa Williamson went to Rutgers. She was a couple of years ahead of me. Y'all know her as Sister Soldier, you know, she was my big sister. And man, she was a dynamic speaker. I would watch her. I want to shout out Glenn Arnold. There was a bunch of folks who were, you know, Alfred Edmond, who's been at Black Enterprise magazine for years. You know, he left beyond his resumes, and, you know, he gave me a blueprint on how to be a student leader and a journalist. I took very seriously watching and studying other people. And Rutgers, what was great about Rutgers, because of the location, its proximity to major cities like New York and Philadelphia, we had speakers coming from all over the country. So I also would watch speakers when they came to the school. James Baldwin was brought there. I didn't really understand how great he was at the time, but I was there, and I'm glad that I got to see him, before he passed. And I would go to every kind of program just to hear speakers. And that's how I learned. It was a process, it was a journey, but it was something that I took very seriously, that I don't want to be stuck in the same place. So part of being a leader, part of being successful is saying that I have to constantly move the needle. That's one of the phrases that's been in my head for a long time. And back to what I said earlier, I got to be willing to add some things to my leadership toolbox, the skill sets. Kevin, you're not a good speaker. You have to learn how to be a good speaker. You have to use your voice. You have to become a stronger communicator in all forms. You have to your point, what you just said, you have to learn how to network with people. I started doing that with student leaders around the country. This is before social media, before the internet. We just had calling cards. We just call people and talk to them. Going to student leadership conferences over and over again and seeing how people are doing things at Columbia University or Howard University, all that had an impact on me, and it was a deep dive for me, and I haven't stopped. The skill sets that I picked up at RU are things that I mean it, they're invaluable to me. Learning how to research, learning how to read history in a different kind of way. All of it played a role. And just saying that you're not comfortable with, that I would say to people, fear is a prison. We can't be stuck in fear. There's nothing wrong with being scared of things and being hesitant, but you're going to be stuck in the same place if you're not willing to get outside your comfort zone. You got to be willing to push yourself. And that's what myself and the students that I went to Rutgers with, we did eventually. We just kept pushing and pushing. And I still do that to this day. It's not a year that goes by. What do? There's not a year that goes by that I don't try at least 2 or 3 things that I haven't done before. There's not a year that goes by that I don't add new people to my network. That's important. And when I say new people, every generation. I don't just hang out with people my generation. I hang out with people who are millennials, Generation X, my generation, and the baby boomers / civil rights generation. If you go to my Facebook page, it ain't just Black folks, it's people of all backgrounds. I'm proud to be who I am as an African person, as a Black person, but also I'm like, you know what? I need to learn from all different types of people. That's important because to me, part of being successful is constantly being willing to reinvent yourself, to grow. And that's what I learned as a student at Rutgers, be open to growing.
Thank you.
Hey,
So,
Mr.
hi, how you doing?
Good to see you.
So we're talking about unlocking pathways to success. And honestly, this pursuit of educational equity and unlocking pathways to success is really going to be a journey, right? Not necessarily a finish line. And you mentioned the importance of alumni working together with universities, with the students. So can you speak to some effective strategies that you may have seen that are strategies for collaboration between university leadership and alumni to support student success?
Yeah, I mean, mentorship is the big word that we use. It's important that people see role models. For example, if y'all were listening to me very closely, I said my mother a few times, never mentioned a father, which means I needed desperately father figures, male figures. And so I remember, Rutgers alumni who were men, Black men specifically, who had an impact on me, and how important it was for us to have access to them that many of them still lived in the state of New Jersey. Many of them still lived around Rutgers in New Brunswick. That's a huge deal because I needed to see that. I needed to see some examples of it. And so I think one of the things that Rutgers can do is make sure to institutionalize those relationships. And that doesn't mean that that goes for all gender identities, not just Black males, not just heterosexual Black males, but any and all gender identities. Who we all need mentors, we all need role models. Someone who can say to us, "This is how I did it." I'm not saying you have to follow the same path, but here's some things that you can learn from, and you can remix it, as we say in hip hop, and put your own spin on it. But if you don't have any template whatsoever, young people need templates. That's what I was given. I had a template. I cannot tell you, Alfred Edmond, and I don't even know he realizes the impact. He was gone by the time I got to Rutgers, but because he left behind his resumes and his writing samples, I actually just kind of modeled my journey after him. That's what I did. That made a huge difference, and so I can't say that enough. And I think that's something that has to be formalized because I think, and I got to say this to you all, I've seen a huge drop off since I was in college, of particularly the Black male population at places like Rutgers and all around the country. And we've got to get the sisters, those sisters are holding it down. Sisters are like, clear, I got to get this degree. I got to get my education. And so I'm saying I will even, and I know there are Rutgers brothers who are alum who have talked about it. And I'm part of some of the groups, that circulate information online, but I want to see us double down on that, because this is something that's very, very serious to me. The lack of brothers on these campuses. It's so bad, y'all. I'm not even just talking about Rutgers for a second. The last 10, 15 years, any state in the country, any school I've been to, I'm lucky if it's a Black organization bringing me, if there's one Black male in the group. It's Black women, students. And so what can the schools do? It's the same thing that we did when I was at Rutgers. We actually went to the university and said, look, we need to recruit Black and brown young men, Black and Latinx young men from Plainfield, Trenton, Camden, Jersey City, Newark, all the areas where many of us are concentrated in the state. And we actually put together a high school recruitment program as students, and the university paid for it. And a lot of those young men ended up coming to Rutgers University. That's a fact. But that needs to be a consistent program, and there needs to be a support system in place for them during their time at the university so they actually finish school. That's what I think we can do.
We agree with you wholeheartedly. Today, we had a college fair for some students who don't normally get used and exposed to different colleges and universities. So we're right up your alley. I want to talk a little bit more, just to jump back. You mentioned that we should definitely diversify our palette, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. So what words of advice do you have for that lone star, for that person who might feel as though they're fighting the cause on their own? They don't have too many people bought in just yet, or they just feel as though no one is supporting them as much as they can. Do you have any advice or encouragement for them?
Well, I mean, I think individuality is important. That's, y'all are asking great questions. Like, how do I put it? I think that we have a right to be who we are, no matter who we are, but I also think that we have to be willing to learn in other spaces. I think, like, I'm an only child, and I love being an only child. Like, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? I'm by myself. I'm a writer, which is a very solitary profession. I can't write. I write by myself. But I know that my response is, we need communities of people. Like, we need this program. We need alumni. We need EOF. We need, I need communities of people. And that's the only way I think I've been able to move forward in life. When I was at Rutgers, it was the African Student Congress, it was the Paul Robeson Cultural Center. There were communities, it was the EOF office, literally communities of people. I belong to a fraternity now. I'm in a hip hop community. I'm a vegan. I mean, that's why I'm drinking this green thing. I belong to different kinds of communities. And I wish that someone had said to me between the ages of 18 and 22 when I was at Rutgers, that it's really important that you always are connected to communities of people, even as you maintain your individual identity, as you do your thing. You still need people. It's like John Donne said in Meditation 27, no man, he said, but we're going to be progressive, no human being is an island, And I think that it's very dangerous for us as college students to just isolate ourselves. And we know at a university that's as big as Rutgers, it's very easy to disappear, to just be a student ID number. There were times when I would just disappear, but it's like, I think we do ourselves a disservice where there's no connection to other human beings, which is why you see some people clinging to social media, even before COVID, because a lot of us realize we need something out there to plug into. And I think that's a skill that we actually need to develop. As much as I love social media and I'm on it all the time and I'm on the hottest, latest stuff, Clubhouse, everything, nothing beats human interaction. I'm sorry, y'all, nothing beats that. And so I think that, it's important for us as students and alumni to really stress, once we get past COVID, let's come back together so we can see each other eyeball to eyeball and talk about what we need, how we can support each other, and meet people where they are. Everyone's not going to be a speaker. Not everyone's going to be comfortable speaking in front of people. But last time I checked, everyone does need love and support. Can I say one other quick thing? Because I just thought about it, made me laugh. Reason why bringing high schoolers to Rutgers is so important, because I was one of those high school kids who didn't come to Rutgers until I got to Rutgers. I'm gonna tell y'all, I did not know that there was a North Jersey where I was from, that there was a Central Jersey, and that there was a South Jersey. I had no clue. And I was like, why are these kids from South Jersey calling Subway sandwiches hoagies? Why are they calling it Wawa when we call it 7-Eleven? I had no idea that even Jersey had multiple cultures going on. You know what I mean? That's why it's important to do these kind of things, bring high school there, because we got exposure is so important. I was clueless. I was like, what's Central Jersey? Oh, that's where we are right now. I had no idea. Anyone else? Someone raised their hand, I
See
see.
some hands raised.
Oh.
Is that Charmaine?
Hey,
Charmaine, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, Charmaine Thomas.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I do have a quick question. So kind of
can I
speaking,
see you or are you shy?
yeah, you can.
Cool.
I don't know if I can start my video.
You should be able to, can you check now, Charmaine?
Yes.
There you are. Hey, what's
Hi.
up?
Good, how are you? Oh,
Good.
that was just not even. Okay, well, so kind of speaking to what you were talking about with stepping out of your comfort zone, I feel like I tend to have like it's uncomfortable or there's certain anxiety about it. So do you have any ways to manage that when you're trying to, become a leader or just get out of your comfort zone?
Great question, Charmaine. I still have anxieties at times. Trust me. It. Um, I do a lot of breathing exercises. I wasn't joking. I really am a vegan now. I'm not imposing that on anybody. People can do whatever they want with food. But what veganism led me to was yoga and meditation and just learning how to kind of calm myself. After this program is over, I'm going right to the gym to work out. These are things I actually didn't do at Rutgers. I was an athlete growing up. I ran track all 4 years in high school, played baseball from little league through high school. But once I got to Rutgers, I didn't do anything that was physically active that actually my brain was just kind of like whatever. I think it's important to practice what I call self-care, what we call self-care, and ask ourselves, where's this energy coming from, this anxiety coming from? Charmaine, you're a genius. You know that, right? You are a genius. You are a leader and your voice matters. And you just have to be willing to get out there and just speak and do it consistently. And and as you do it, also be prepared, which means we got to hashtag read, study, travel, so we actually know what we're talking about as well, as leaders. But I think you just have to do it, and it's practice. It's just like what they teach us in yoga is that every time we come to class, it's a practice, and that's what it was for me as a young leader. I kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and you start to become comfortable with it. It's just like anything else that we do on a regular basis. You realize, okay, this is part of who I am. This is part of my life, and you embrace that. So I want to encourage you to be consistent about it and be intentional about it. Is that cool? Wait, I think you're muted. Uh-oh.
There we go. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Where are you from? Jersey?
Yeah, I think it's north. It's Mount Olive. I don't know if you know where that is.
Where's Mount Olive? I can't hear you, Lynn. I see the head shaking. Is that North Jersey?
Northwest Jersey.
Oh, Northwest. Okay, cool.
I don't even
Very,
know.
very nice to meet you. What year are you?
I'm a freshman right now.
You just got here.
Yeah.
You got time. Be patient with yourself as well. I mean, like I said earlier, it's a process. I mean, who I was as a first year student wasn't who I was a couple years down the line. I had to go through some experiences of learning how to be a leader and actually believing that that's what I was. It takes time, so be patient with yourself. But you're there. We need you. The world needs you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Miss Tootie.
Yes, I do have a question. So
Hey.
kind of going off of the topic of leadership, specifically student leadership, I remember you mentioned that, you were very involved in campus, and as a student leader, you and your peers pushed, and you definitely pushed back on the institution and what your needs were. So when you mentioned like criticizing your country in order to make it better, how can the institution really open up pathways for students to, specifically student organizations like Black and Brown student organizations that feel a little bit more policed than others? How can they open up avenues for those students to now criticize and offer their recommendations to improving their success, improving their pathways to develop as leaders, and really expand the way they support their peers on campus?
Well, I think any institution, not just Rutgers, any institution in our country that says it's for students, because universities and colleges, as we know, would not exist without young people or students, whether regardless of what their age is or generation is. And so it should be a democracy. We should want to hear what young people have to say. We should not be afraid of what young people have to say. We should embrace it. There should be interactive conversations with young people. What do you need? What would make this experience better for you? I think also one of the things that we talked about when I was at Rutgers, which I still feel should be the case at any institution, it should be reflective of the state in some form, or at least make an effort. I mean, you can't tell me in New Jersey, where Black folks and brown folks are at least 15 or 20% of the state population, the population of the university should be reflective of the population of the people in the state. That's important. That's tremendously important, because it doesn't just do a disservice to Black and brown young people or students, but also does a disservice to white students as well, because they're also not learning about people who are different than them. They're just looking at the world through the lens that they've been given, which is whiteness, which is equally dangerous. You know what I mean? And so, it needs to be something where, what can we do? Just like English 101 was mandatory when I went to college, the first, there needs to really be mandatory diversity programs, leadership training for students as they're coming in.
You say that louder for the people in the back.
Mandatory diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership training for students as they're coming in. One of the things that I love, I've done this at a lot of colleges, universities around the country, right in August, September, whether it's during COVID or not. I have been a part of that. I've spent full days with universities and colleges where here's the big program for all the incoming students, and then we break up into groups and let's talk about this, because you got students coming in who have, been taught racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia, right on down the list. You know what I mean? Have never been challenged on it. It's not about having every student think the same, but it is about saying, hey, we need you to really think about what an education means. What does diversity mean? What does leadership really mean? And one of the simple definitions of leadership for me is you're a bridge builder, and people who are not good leaders are bridge destroyers. Big difference, big difference. You know what I mean? So I think that those are the kind of things that I feel like need to be implemented. Like the job of an educational institution is to create leaders in all spaces, is to create leaders, not followers, leaders, which means that they should be encouraged to use their voices all the time, even if it makes the older adults, the administration, uncomfortable at times. That's what a university should be doing. That's real education.
Before we open up for questions, I just have one follow-up question to that, Kevin. You do a lot of activism. So whether it is women's rights, homelessness, manhood, we free the world, you have a lot of different areas that you're passionate about. What advice do you tell the student who's also passionate about 5 million things and they want to tackle all the causes at the same time? What is your recommendation for them, or us for that matter?
Wow. Well, you got to focus, you got to focus. And that's important. I even say that to myself, excuse me. I even say to myself now as an older person, you got to focus, because you can't do everything. But you have to become exceptional at something, Like for me, I'm very clear that my journey is writer, speaker, activist, like humanitarian, philanthropist, whatever the word is. And I support a lot of different causes, but what's the focus for me is really race and gender issues. Those two, if I boil it down, race and gender issues. When I say gender issues, that certainly includes not just sexism, but also homophobia, transphobia, just this notion that there's only one way of looking at certain gender identities, or the binary as we talk about, and that's become my passion. So a lot of my work comes through those two places, race, racism, and manhood, deconstructing masculinity, from toxic to hopefully healthy manhood. And are there other things I believe in? Yeah, I'm a vegan, which means I became an environmentalist, which means as a vegan, I don't eat meat, which means I support animal rights. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that I support, but I'm not going to be at every single rally, every single protest. I can't do that. I wouldn't get my own work done. And I also know what I'm versed in. Like I've spent years studying, Rutgers I was in the E185 section of the library, all the Black books. I just absorbed it. And then after college, I was challenged by some powerful women of different backgrounds. They were like, Kev, you got to read Bell Hooks, you got to read Audre Lorde, you got to read now Eve, now former Eve Ensler, you got to read Gloria Steinem. And so I began to think about gender issues, and that became part of my work. And so it's also a process, it's a journey. But the important thing is we want you to be passionate as students, as student leaders. We want you to be passionate, and we don't want you to lose that passion. I know a lot of folks I went to school with, they were, all about it back then, but now they're like, nah. I'm like, you can't lose that passion. The world will not change if people just give up and think, that's all I can do when I'm in college. We need you for the rest of your lives. That's important. But identify, let me say like this, when you mentioned homelessness, it's specifically a clothing drive for homeless young people in December. So I compartmentalize things. So I know when I'm doing that. I couldn't do that every single day because that's just, it's a tremendous amount of work. And so I support organizations that do the work. I think that's important to, strategic partnerships with folks that are doing the work. How can I help in this space, as opposed to thinking I have to do everything for everybody all the time? Back to self-care. Can't do that.
Thank you. But how dare your Douglas friends didn't have you learn about bell hooks? We're appalled.
Because I was like a lot of boys who come to college, very sexist, and was not woke around gender issues until after. That's on me, and I regret it, but it's on me. And it's part of think about it. It's just like, K through 12, I learned that Betsy Ross Soda Flag, I heard about Helen Keller and I heard about Rosa Parks. That was the totality of my education on women and girls, K through 12. So I didn't even think that women's studies was even something that was relevant to my life. Meanwhile, half the country, half the world identify as women, and I was raised by women. You know what I mean? So when I talk about, what we can do, diversity training, I think we cannot continue to let male folks who identify as men come into college campuses and not have honest conversations with them right out the box about sexism, patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, all of it. We can't. I was one of the many who came through and wasn't even a conversation. That's tragic.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
What we like to do is open it up for any questions for any of our attendees that may have some questions. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself.
I'd love to see people. Can we see faces? Are we allowed that? Or are we,
People can start their videos.
Right on.
Well, until someone asks a question, out of your 14 books, which one is your favorite?
All of them. It's like, but you know what, for folks, I would recommend The Education of Kevin Powell, because that's my autobiography, and that's the one we're actually working on now, turning into a TV show. Working on, we finished the script for it for the first episode. I'm not sure if it's gonna be a regular weekly drama. It's gonna be a limited series, as people do these days. But I'm really excited about it because it's about growing up in Jersey. It's about Rutgers. It's about my life after Rutgers. It's about my mother. It's important that we tell my mother's story as well, because again, a lot of times mothers get erased, and I would not be here if it wasn't for my mother. I'm real clear about that. Yeah. Hey, Francine Henry, I see you. Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Está bien?
Muy bien.
Laura Hudson, oh my God. Hey. Joy Colazo, ¿qué pasó? Christina Chisholm, like Shirley Chisholm from Brooklyn. You got Bayesian roots by any chance, that Chisholm name? Is it the West Indian Chisholm or the American Chisholm? I can't hear you, muted. You're muted.
American.
Okay, cool, that's what's up. Kelsey.
Hi, Kelsey. Kelsey's a McNair scholar, y'all. Please, are you still in Michigan?
That's incredible. Hey, Kelsey, you're a scholar. Is it?
Hi.
Mhm.
I'm trying to formulate a question, and I have perfectionism, so I'm trying to make it perfect before I ask it.
No,
But
don't
I'll
do
just take
that.
this time to just do it. Be courageous. Hi, everyone. Oh my God, I'm seeing so many familiar faces. Hi, Keisha. Hi, Kendra. I love you. So I don't know. I heard writer, journalist. I heard activist. I don't know if organizer kind of falls into that. I don't know how you would describe
Yeah.
yourself, but I find and you were talking about leaders and how Rutgers makes leaders, and I've been on that because I try to organize with my friends around Black literature, around Black art, self-healing, all these things, and so I kind of put that hat on as like facilitator, organizer, and so I was told by a friend recently that there always has to be one, right? There always has to be one leader, one point person, one front person. And I try to push back on that. And I think it takes community. I don't think I'm perfect. I don't want to be the only one. I want to be in community with people. So I guess my question here is have you seen successful, as an activist, have you seen successful models for, more egalitarian leadership, community leading, things like that? Because I'm over here tripping, is she right? I'm not always comfortable being front and center, and, I'm very extroverted. I excel in that role, but sometimes I have insecurities. And I'm like, am I the best at this? Do I have the most knowledge? And so I like to corral people together. And so I'll leave it there because I can just rant and rant. But yeah, what are your experiences with, community leadership, group leadership, and the likes?
Well, great question, and I thought it was a perfect question. What's your sign? Wanting to be perfect. What's your astrological sign?
I mean, if you were talking top three, I'm Aries sun, Aquarius moon, Capricorn rising, but most people just harp on the Aries sun part, but okay. I got the whole chart for you.
All right. I think that savior model leadership is very dangerous. Very dangerous, because if that savior is gone, then we're in trouble. Let me give me a couple of quick examples. Two of my heroes. One's a white brother, one's a Black brother. One's name is Bobby Kennedy, one's name is Dr. King. They're killed 2 months apart in 1968. Dr. King in April 68, Bobby in June of 68. People put so much stock in them saving folks, that when they were killed, it deflated people, and some people just stopped. You know what I mean? What we did when I was a student at Rutgers is that we called it even development of leadership. If I read a book, we passed the book to somebody else. You got to read the autobiography of Malcolm X too. You got to read George Jackson Solve That Brother too. You got to read Lerone Bennett Before the Mayflower too. You know what I mean? So that one person can have all this information. This is something that me and Sister Soldier did a lot. We would just share books with each other over and over again. So we all were getting the information, and then we also rotated positions. And so I don't think that any time when I was at Rutgers, only once was I actually even the president or chairperson of an organization. There were points where I was a secretary, I was a sergeant at arms, I was a treasurer, I was different things because I was also learning different skill sets as an organization. Of course, I'm an organizer. I use the terms activist, organizer interchangeably. What does it all mean? You do things, you make things happen. You know how to make things happen in different spaces. You know what I'm saying? You know how to pull people together. To Ms. Wiley's point, you know how to network. You know how to bring, you motivate people, you inspire people. I think more than one person needs to be able to do that. It can't just be one person, because if something, go back to the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. Fred Hampton was such a dynamic leader. When he was tragically killed the way he was, it sucked the life out of the Black Panther Party in Illinois at that time. You know what I mean? Can't do that. We need multiple people to be skilled in different ways. And people got to be willing to step up as well. This is a conversation I have even with folks who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and older. You can't just keep waiting for Kevin Powell or Kelsey Thorne or Dr. Wooten to step up. What are you going to do? What are you willing to contribute to this work? So I do believe in community leadership. And I think part of being a leader is also identifying what are the gifts that this person has. So one of my friends said to me today, you seem to have a lot of talented people around you. Definitely. I got people who are art directors, graphic designers. Yo, we need a flyer real quick. We need an e-flyer. I need that flyer to be able to go on Instagram. I need that flyer to be over here. I have people who know how to do PR, marketing, branding. There they go. I have folks that I can call on that can actually produce events. I got folks who can edit stuff really quick if we got to write something. You know what I mean? So who's team Kelsey Thorne? Like, who's the circle around you? We have to move as a team. And I'm proud to say, we had an organization at Rutgers. We ironically, Sister Soldier was the president for a moment. It was called 100 Black Men. She was the president because no Black men wanted to take the role at first. You know what I'm saying? And then there were some brothers who stepped up, but eventually all of us stepped up, and all of us are still in touch to this day. And we all still support each other all these years later, and all these different skill sets that we have. And so I think that's the kind of leadership model I want to see. And what an example of it, everyone should look up Brotherhood Sister Soul out of New York City. Brotherhood Sister Soul, an amazing organization. It was co-founded by two Black males who went to an Ivy League school, Brown University, together. They came back to New York, where they're from, and they started off by addressing issues with Black males, but they realized, Black and brown males, and they realized we cannot forget the women and girls. And so they also started Sister Soul. And they've made it a point to share leadership, because also one of the issues that we had, then I see all folks here, we have to share leadership. It can't just be, they share leadership in different ways. They don't care if you're identified as male, female, the binary. They don't care if you're non-gender conforming, complete, whatever it is. We need to, if you are a leader, you're a leader. You're a leader. And we need you to be part of this leadership circle. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what leaders do. I can't imagine doing anything without consulting, Kelsey, other people that I respect as leaders. But if you're going to be a leader, you got to #, read, study, travel. It's really critical. It's really critical, because the most important thing you can do if you're serious about being a leader is be prepared. And if we're not reading, and knowing history, and knowing current events, and knowing technology, and knowing social media, and knowing about hip hop and pop culture, and did you see that Britney Spears documentary? Oh, did you see Judas and the Black Messiah? Did you see One Night in Miami? Did you see what happened with the Super Bowl? Do you know what's going on with the NBA? We need leaders who can pivot in all these different ways, who understand what the term intersectionality means, and they understand what the term woke means, you know what I'm saying? They understand all of this stuff. That's what we need, and we have to understand, as powerful as these little gadgets may be, this can't be our brains. This still matters, and so we also need a community of leaders who, like Dr. Wooten and everyone here who's a scholar, which is what everyone is, we got to take learning seriously, in a real practical way. I can't tell you how many people have hit me on social media like, yo, Kev, where'd you get that information from? I'm like, son, Google. It's called Google. It's called Google. Just Google it. So I also realize part of community leadership is community learning and showing people how to dig for information, because not everyone knows how to do it. You can't even make that assumption, But and part of it, Kelsey, the last thing I'll say, self-care. Like, I think all of us need to meditate. Like, I lead a writing workshop starting back up tomorrow night. Everybody's welcome. I'll share the information with Miss Flannery and Miss Wiley and everyone. But we start the sessions every week with a meditation. Just, man, we'd have done that when I was at Rutgers. I've been, y'all crazy. We ain't doing that. That's corny, son. That's what we'd have said. Now I'm like, because this work is so hard being a leader. How many of y'all in leadership positions will admit it is hard being a leader? It's lonely being a leader at times. You're often misunderstood being a leader. You're often frustrated and disappointed at times being a leader. So you better have something in place that is going to protect your mind, your spirit, your body on a regular basis. Because just think what's work. People say all kinds of stuff about you. I mean, how many of y'all have been dissed by people just making up stuff, saying crazy stuff about you? I ran for Congress twice. I know. I mean, people were just insane stuff. Like, really? That's who I am? I had no idea that's who I was. You know what I mean? So, but that it needs to be a community value system, Kelsey. Where's my tribe at, as we say? Where's my tribe at? One of my big regrets about my years at Rutgers, I never connected with the Mason Grove School. Is Mason Grove School still there? You know why? I'm an artist. I'm a writer. Yeah, I'm a journalist, but I realize at its core, I'm a creative person. And I needed to be connected to people who also thought outside the box, my tribe, communities. Imagine what I could have learned from those students, the actors, the actresses, the dancers, the painters, in addition to the activists. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, and then some. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything, and especially the self-care, Ashe. I feel that, and I receive it fully. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm good. I'm rolling with Rutgers.
Awesome. Well, are there any other final questions? Oh, we have
another hand up.
Okay, so I'm not sure whose hand was up first, but I see in my screen, Heron Funettet. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, my name's Heron Fontanet. I have a question about something that Kevin Powell brought up earlier in the conversation, and it was educational equity. Kevin Powell, I don't know if you remember this, but we actually met at a Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast like a year ago.
In what state? In Jersey or somewhere else?
Yes, here in Jersey.
Okay. Was it in North? Was it in North for the NAACP?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Can I see you, please?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi. And you mentioned this the other time about educational equity. So my question was, how have you observed or been able to pinpoint the disparities within the ADOS, that's American Descendant of Slaves community, between the lack of wealth and lack of education? And how do you believe that Black students with ancestral roots in America can push their case for educational and wealth equity here in America?
Let me say this about ADOS first and foremost. I think it's a classic example of Black self-hatred. I'm just gonna call it what it is. When I was at Rutgers University, my two best friends my first year in college were Trinidadian and Bayesian. I'm African-American. I made it a point right from the very beginning, I can't just learn African-American history, which I need to learn, but I also need to learn the history of folks in the West Indies. And I also need to learn the history of folks from Africa. I need to learn about Africa. I don't do this separation of people based on where they're born and raised. That's called a slave mentality. That's called a colonial mentality. You know what I mean? And when I hear people saying crazy stuff like, we need to just focus on the African descendant people who were born and raised in America, I'm like, well, how do you explain then, folks who happen to be West Indian descent, but their ancestors came here, say, during the Harlem Renaissance, when there was waves of immigrants from the West Indies, from the Caribbean during that time, who just happened to be here since the 1920s. You know what I'm saying? And so it's backwards. And I see this debate happening on Clubhouse, people getting insulted all over the place on this new app, Clubhouse, this whole conversation about, where you're not really Black because you're not really Black experience because your family's not from America. That's insane. We're all on the same slave ships. We just got dropped off in different places. It's insane. It's insane. It's insane. Insane. I'm saying this now as a scholar, as a historian of our history, specifically for a second. We can't afford to get caught up in divide and conquer. Willie Lynch is a fictitious story. Willie Lynch never existed. Let's stop saying that story. But what did exist is this concept, and still exists, is the concept of white supremacy, which is pitting us against each other over and over again. That's what exists. You know what I'm saying? And so, number one, that I think that if the conversation is about reparations, well, there needs to be global reparations for African people based on what has happened to African people worldwide. That's a fact. From Africa to the Caribbean to America and England and Canada, let's take it, and Brazil, let's go all, and Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Haiti, let's go across the board. You know what I mean? I love all people, period, no matter what their background, but I also love all Black people, all African people. I don't look for the differences. When I hear someone speaking Creole who's Haitian or Patois who's Jamaica, I'm like, well, my family's from South Carolina. My mother speaks Geechee. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. We took this language and we made it into something else, And so when we talk about equity, and I'm trying to follow your line of questioning, for education, it's really simple for me. I should not have been taught, Heron and everyone else, to hate myself K through 12. I should not have been taught by the school system to hate myself kindergarten through the 12th grade. It's unacceptable that I can go to school and be an A student K through 12. I finished second in my graduating class out of 8th grade. I was a salutatorian. I finished third in my high school class, and I won the math award and the English award. There wasn't none of that left brain, right brain thing. I just love learning, period. But how is it that I learned nothing about the contributions of my people. We're talking about Black history for a second, to my education. You know what that's called? That's not just a lack of equity, that's called educational malpractice. That's educational malpractice. And it's not just Black folks, it's also Latinx folks, it's Asian folks, it's Native American, Indigenous people, you know, it's Jewish people, it's Italian people, it's Irish people. The first time I went to Ireland, I was struck by all the folks who were actually Irish that I was told were English when I was growing up, because the English wanted to take credit for all the great Irish writers. You feel what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so, you know, or back to women, we're about to celebrate Women's History Month. No, nothing about women. You know, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, you know, nothing about that community, nothing about disabled people. You feel what I'm saying? All of that. So when we talk about educational equity, why are all those people I just named left out of my education? You know, why is it, for me, someone who grew up in New Jersey with a large Italian American community, for example, including Jersey City, where I'm born and raised, I knew nothing about Italian Americans, nothing. Irish Americans, nothing. Polish Americans, nothing. It ain't just about Black folks I'm talking about here. Educational equity means that you actually learn about the contributions of all people equally. And people, no matter who they are or what their identities are, actually see themselves in their educational curriculum, so that they know that they can actually be a writer. If they're a little Black boy from Jersey City, Kevin Powell, I fell in love with writing when I was 11 years old. Book called For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. Important, love Ernest Hemingway. But how is it that it wasn't until I got to Rutgers and people like Dr. Cheryl Wall that I actually learned that Black folks actually wrote books? See my point? That's what educational equity means to me. Any other conversations about equity, as far as I'm concerned, as someone who has literally been to all 50 states in this country, all kinds of colleges, universities, high schools, grade schools, public schools, private schools, big cities, medium cities, small towns, rural areas. I've been in so many different spaces. The common thread that I see is that many of us in America are grossly undereducated about who we are. That's the common thread. That's the common thread. You wonder why January 6th happened, insurrection? That's why. You wonder why Zoom bombings happening with our Rutgers Zoom calls? That's the educational system. That's why. You know what I mean? Until we address that, because education is the great equalizer. Look what it did for my life. I'm able to help my mother and my community because I got an opportunity because of EOF. EOF was created by my friend, the former governor of New Jersey, Tom Kean, a Republican, a different kind of Republican, white brother, who understood, yo, you know what I mean? We have to do something to address these inequities, Harry and everyone else. And we need to create a program that's actually going to be a pipeline to get these kids from Newark, from Plainfield, from Jersey City, from Trenton, wherever they're from, onto a college campus, because they deserve an opportunity to have an opportunity. That's what equity means. Can I have an opportunity to have an opportunity? And so it's two things. Can I have an opportunity? And is the education I'm getting showing me in the education? If it's not, it's malpractice. I don't care. You know, women, if I was someone who identified as a woman, no matter what my racial skin color, I'd be deeply offended by the absence of women in the curriculum. Deeply offended. Everything's done by men? Really? No. Joe Biden would not be president of the United States without women, specifically Black women, period. And so that's what equity means to me. It means real democracy. And that's what we got to keep fighting for, real democracy.
Well, thank you, Heron, for your question. And thank you, Mr. Powell, for your comprehensive and well-rounded response. We appreciate that so much. We have one more question. Katsura, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Katora Hudson, East Orange native, Douglas College alum.
EO.
And yes, EO representing. I love how much you talk about self-care. That's been a huge focus for me for the past couple of years, really this past year. And even when I talk to my friends, we have our Zoom catch-ups, I'm like, at the end of it, let's end on some kind of positive news. Just because so much of this work can get so heavy, especially if you do DEI work. Yeah. So I would love for you to just to talk about the role that joy plays in your life and in self-care. Yeah.
Music. Don't laugh at me, y'all. I just I just bought some tap dance shoes. I tap dance as part of my workout now. Cause I'm like, I got a little old school stationary bike over here. Cause of COVID, we can't really do a lot. But I was like, this stationary bike is mad boring. You know what I'm saying? And part of my language, my butt hurts from riding this thing all the time. I can't do this. I need to do something else. I love dancing. Guess where I started dancing hard at? Rutgers University. You know what I'm saying? Those parties at Rutgers were legendary. I'm sure they still are. But joy for me is music, is dancing, COVID has forced me to go inside. It's like, okay, I need to make food for myself. Food cooking is a form of joy. My gosh, watching old movies is a form of joy. I just think that we should do something every single day. I'm so glad you asked that question, Sister Hudson. At least do one thing every single day that brings you joy, because this is heavy enough. This is depressing enough. It's like last week I was at my mother's house to help her with some things. And it was other, and what was on was the impeachment hearings. And I was just like, man, this is depressing. This is really depressing where we are in this country. And my mother's like, I'm not changing the channel. I was like, can we please change the channel? And, I flipped to something that brought me some joy, for a second. And I just think we got to fight for that. We got to fight for that. I think that because what you're talking about is our mental health, It is our mental health. And if we're honest about it, Americans, no matter what our background, we literally have been in an abusive relationship for at least the last 4 years because of what just happened for the last 4 years. And we're in the middle of a global pandemic, unlike anything we've seen since Paul Robeson was a student at Rutgers University over 100 years ago. I know, I have friends, sadly, one in particular who committed suicide last year. This is real. This is real stuff we're talking about. And so we've got to encourage happiness and joy, and we got to fight for that as well. Yes, we got to fight against the isms, the phobias, the othering of people, but we also have to find some spaces that, this is joyful. Last week we did my writing group just put out a book called 2020, The Year That Changed America. It's on Amazon Kindle. We did a big book party. Almost 300 people showed up. We had V, formerly Abe Insler there. Nikki Giovanni was there. It was incredible. And we had a DJ. And guess what, y'all? The event was supposed to have been 7 to 9. And we had the DJ started playing music. We went on for another 90 minutes. People were literally dancing in their chairs. It was gangster. To Ms. Hudson's point, joy. So we're actually going to have a Women's History Month party on March 5th. Y'all get the invite. Same DJ. We're just going to, it's like, why not? Think about when COVID hit last year, how D Nice blew up on Instagram, throwing those parties. And all the DJs started throwing those parties. And let's be real about it. Everybody's not D Nice. Some of those DJs suck, straight up. But the point is, given all the separations in the world, the one thing that does bring people together other than food, music. You know what I'm saying? Music. So when I'm down there tap dancing, trying to figure out how to learn how to do it, I got Prince on, I got Michael Jackson on, Madonna, I got the Eurythmics, I got Kendrick Lamar, whatever, because I'm like, I need to be happy, and I need to be happy. I need to be happy. So fight for your joy, And, as leaders, also take pride in the small victories along the way, because if we constantly feel like it's just, we're pushing a boulder, and this is for the adults, the students, for everyone, take pride in, you're helping to produce another leader. Take pride in you are a leader yourself. Take pride in small victories. Please take pride in small victories, along the way. Seriously. Take pride in the fact that, yep, this may have started ugly tonight with that word being scrolled across the screen, but here we are at the end of it talking about joy. Y'all feel me? That's what's important. That's what matters. Yeah.
So I see that we have a few more hands raised, but I know we are well over our time.
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, how many hands? This is Rutgers. I'm good.
There are 2.
I can do 2 more.
2 more. Okay. So
I just want to see everyone, though.
We got to see everyone. So I see Amy Michael with her camera on and her hand raised. Go ahead, Amy. Unmute yourself.
Hey, Amy Michael.
Hi, Kevin.
Oh, there you are.
Hi, Kevin. Livingston College.
Oh my God.
1987.
Wow.
From Livingston College in 1987. And so I think we were at the university around the same time. And, the anti-apartheid movement was like in full swing when I was at Rutgers. And so I work with students in my current role. And so I tell them, like, well, when I was in college, students took over the student center, held it for a month, arrested at basketball games against apartheid. And, they can't believe it. Like, they can't believe that Rutgers, that happened. So my question to you is, like, what differences do you see between your generation of activists, I guess, and the activists of today?
That's a good question. And you're right. I lived in the towers on Livingston, so I remember it well. The Livingston campus. Rutgers has changed so much. I'm like, the amenities that y'all got there now for students, I'm like, I wish we had that stuff. Folks are living well. I try not to do two things. One is what I call generational dissing, where I'm like, well, our generation did X, Y, and Z, and what's wrong with your generation? Because I didn't like it when the baby boomers, civil rights generation did that to us as Gen Xers, and they still do it to us. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them be like bugging out. I can't get down with generational dissing. I love millennials. I love Generation Z, straight up. I think that, there's some differences. I just encourage reading. One thing that we took seriously, we probably Generation X, Amy, our generation is probably the last generation that didn't have this stuff. Like, we remember when it started with the cell phones and the internet and the chat. Remember, AOL chat rooms and all that kind of stuff. And so I think we may be the last generation that's kind of been able to go back and forth between the two. Whereas if you're born in the 90s to 2000s, this is the world that you know. And so what I say to younger people is that you just have a responsibility to go back and look at what was happening in the 80s and 90s. It's really important, even the 2000s. You got to know the eras before you. When I was in college, we made it a point to study the 60s hard. Like, we would study all of the stuff that had happened. What was Vietnam about? What was all those movements about? Who were those people? Who were those names? And I just really encourage that, because otherwise what's end up happening, you reinvent the wheel over and over again. As much as I support Black Lives Matter last year, I loved that. I thought it was beautiful to see people of all backgrounds out there. But as I listened to people speaking at the rallies here in New York and Brooklyn, where I live, I could tell the people who read books and the people who didn't read books just by what was coming out of their mouths. Some people were just making stuff up. Some of them were younger people, some of them were older people. But I was like, you got to read. You can't just make this stuff up. You know what I mean? That was drilled into me as a student at Rutgers University. You really have to know history. This is important, and I think that this has become a distraction for people in a lot of ways. And I mean, I'm literally about to go on it after this and talk about Black history today and stuff like that. But I also know that behind me, I have tons of books. It ain't just my iPhone. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want to encourage people to think about that, like that balance. We talk about self-care a lot. I'm glad Sister Hudson brought up joy, but I also want to encourage balance. If nothing else, if I can give you a couple of resources, two speeches that I think we should listen to is one, Dr. King's Vietnam War speech from 1967. He gave it 1 year to the day he was assassinated, April 4th, 67, at Riverside Church in New York City. In that speech, he said a couple of things that were very powerful to me that I think are relevant to what you asked, Amy. He said that we were moving as a country, this is 1967, from being a people-oriented society to a thing-oriented society. He said this in 67. Yo, people value this more than they value people at this point. He also said in that speech, we need to have a radical revolution of values. He used the term computer in that speech. He was foreshadowing this addiction, because this is an addiction for a lot of us. We can't function without this. I mean, Clubhouse is the latest, newest app, as some of y'all know. I mean, I see people in there, like, I'm like, do they have jobs? Do they have families? Like, why are we on this nonstop? You know what I mean? So no matter what generation we're in, Amy, what I'm getting at, we can't afford to lose our humanity any further. You know what I'm saying? When you talked about the anti-apartheid movement, the thing for me as an 18-year-old, when I got to Rutgers, I saw Black, white, Latinx, Asian students, all gender identities had taken over the Rutgers University Student Center on College Avenue. And I had never seen anything like that in my life. And it was all young people. And they were talking about this place called South Africa, and they were talking about apartheid. They kept talking about this person, Nelson Mandela. I'm like, well, who's Nelson Mandela? And within a few weeks, I got this incredible education, which was initiated by young people. They did it, and so we've got to get back to that. But we also, the anti-apartheid movement was sustained over years. That's what led to Nelson Mandela getting out of jail. That's what led to South African apartheid being dismantled. And we need to understand, in these times, the civil rights movement was 13 years, the heart of it, 1955 to 1968. people are like, Kev, nothing's going to change. I'm like, do you realize it was less than a year that Breonna Taylor and George Floyd got killed and Black Lives Matter exploded? Movement is sustained. It's a marathon. It's not some quick thing. It doesn't work like that. Feminist movement. No, I mean, it's only been 100 years since women got the right to vote. But it's movement. The suffrage movement for women to have the right to vote went on for years and years and years. So that's the advice I give. Like, make a commitment to this thing. This is a marathon, not a sprint. That's what I say, Amy. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And be committed to justice for all people for the rest of your life, no matter what your career or profession is. That's what we got to do. And be committed to love for the rest of your life, for all people. I know we have one last person. Arnett?
I can't show my camera because it doesn't really work. But I kind of want to have a question, and I think it might be a bit deep. So
a bit
when
what?
it comes,
A bit what? I'm sorry.
A bit deep. So when it comes to like education, do you think that there are certain politicians in this country that want to actively make education worse and dissuade people from education, like anti-intellectualism? Do you think people encourage that because they want to keep oppressive institutions up? They want to keep ignorance up so that people don't so that they don't realize other values, so that they don't realize the stuff. Like, do you think that this does actually happen?
I wish you could see my face. Can you see my face, Arnie?
Yes.
I think that ignorance is a multi-billion-dollar business. That's what I think. That's what I think. And I think that I can't spend my energy worrying about what people do that's harmful. What my job is as a leader and your job is as a leader, what am I doing to help go in the opposite direction? That's my response. You know what I mean? And it's a simple response. I know what I do every single day to educate and empower and help and serve people. And it's a rhetorical question for you. What do you do? That's where I think the energy is. I also think that we've got to stop reducing leadership to politicians, because the leadership is everyone in this group, this group today, is anyone who cares and is willing to make a commitment to helping other people. And if we understand American and world history, things have changed, not because of politicians. It's never really changed because of politicians. It's changed because of people power. That's always been the case. What political office did Dr. King hold? What political office did Malcolm X hold? Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker? None. But the work that they did empowered a whole bunch of people and created things like the Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Act, and a bunch of other stuff. So I want us to refocus the energy. That's what I'm saying. We just spent 4 years in an abusive relationship with someone who was participating absolutely in the dumbing down of everything. I'm not giving that, I'm not centering, to speak to in the words of Toni Morrison, our late great writer, let's stop centering stuff that's madness and start centering stuff that's rooted in what we want to see. You feel me, Arnett? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Cool?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for staying with us throughout the challenges in the beginning. Thank you for staying as a community. Thank you for continuing on with the positivity and persisting with our questions and the overall purpose of tonight's event. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us. If we can give a virtual round of applause, those you got your cameras on, use your emoji, drop some love in the chat, whatever you want to do. But we really appreciate having you this evening. We thank you so much. I know you mentioned your IG. If you want to share that again, we can follow you on Instagram and or Twitter.
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook are Kevin Powell in Brooklyn, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn. Twitter is Kevin_Powell, Kevin_Powell. Yeah, and just thank you, Ms. Jones, Ms. Flannery, Dr. Wooten, Ms. Wiley, everyone. Forgive me if I forgot anyone. I love all of you. I appreciate all of you. I think this was rich and a wonderful conversation. I see you, Candace. You just popped up. Great color walls. I got colorful walls too. That's what's up. Are you a student or administrator? Candace has disappeared.
Oh no, I'm here.
Okay.
No, so I'm actually the administrator at the Camden campus.
Okay.
And so I'm a little bit jealous because y'all have this amazing program. And I was like, I've got to be there. So I'm actually an advisor and Rutgers alum and just excited about this topic and wanted to hear more from you. So thanks for letting me participate. I felt like I snuck in with the students, but I appreciate being a part of the conversation now.
Well, I'll come down to Camden virtually. Let's make it happen. You got my information.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I appreciate you all. And, if I can just say this, Ms. Jones, real quick, just, I know it's been hard. I mean, look, I've lost people to COVID. I've lost people to suicide, like I just said. I worry perpetually about my mother and my aunt who are seniors and just, their health and wellness. But we got to keep going, and we got to support each other. We got to love each other, and we got to have hope, because, we have to. We have to. You know what I mean? I've sat here and said to myself, man, since I've been alive, I have survived AIDS, crack, 9/11, Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, and now we're in the middle of COVID. In each case, we lost people tragically, sadly. But what I also think about is how people came together to support each other. So we got to keep pushing, y'all. We can't give up. We must not give up. The only way this world's going to change, we got to keep going.
Thank you. I think there's not much else to say. So with that, we conclude this evening. Thank you again for joining us. If you haven't seen it in the chat, we have a brief evaluation. We're just asking that everyone would complete that. And Kevin, we hope to see you soon. I'm sure we'll stay connected, whether it's Upward Bound, TRIO, all the TRIO programs, educational equity, your family. So we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Blessings to you all. Thank you all so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you again.